Obsidian Gods, Book 1, Bordeaux's Folly. Chapter 6, Sea Legs. Your plan is creased to all hell. Saul paused, taking a look at the people who sat around the room. Aidan sat smugly across from him, his hand rapping on the table. Charles sat off to one side, hunched over, his hands tented and trained in thought. With him he had brought 4 others who were scattered out amongst the room's derelict furniture. One of the 4, a purported codebreaker named Taika, tossed a dusty sepak ball off the ceiling with annoying repetition. Saul leaned forward on the table from the place he had been standing and ruffled his mustache in thought before speaking. "I think you loads are missing the point. We only need to get into the outgoing shuttle bay." "Why not just go straight for the whale's maw? We walk up and knock on the Parabad's door," Charles asked. "Don't be stupid," Aidan scoffed. "The whole place will be littered with dockhands, station attendants, not to mention stand-up merchant naval types like ourselves. We can't just walk in. We'll be seen." "Maybe being seen is the point." Carl, the mouthy dockhand from earlier, chimed in from where he stood at the doorway. "Who invited you?" Saul asked, trying to not appear flustered. Carl motioned to Charles, who returned a nod. "He's your man on the inside?" Aidan asked. "That he is," Charles said, not bothering to look over at Aidan. "A damn fine asset to have." "An asset?" Saul scoffed. "Maybe he'd be useful if he could keep his temper off the stove." "Hey, what's it to you, brother?" Carl mocked. Saul ignored him and instead stared right at Charles. "You told me only those trustworthy would be here." "Trustworthy? Well, that's a matter of perspective." Charles motioned for Carl to come closer. With a smug grin, Carl slammed a stack of papers on the galley table. "There be your trust, old man," he spat. Saul and Aidan both grabbed a portion of the stack. Saul read a few lines: crew compliments, docking schedules, ship manifests, all sequential, assumed untraceable and recently unencrypted. Aidan, who was holding the last page, said, "Dead Earth, that cargo weight ain't right." "Give it here," said Saul, feeling suddenly like a jealous toddler with his hand outstretched. Aidan shrugged and handed him the slip. Saul read line by line. It was a manifest time-stamped for 3 weeks before the Parabad was scheduled to dock at the station. It read, "Gross weight, 9 tons. That's—" Saul paused. Charles, who was looking over his shoulder, suddenly showing a sign of interest, said, "Should be at least 3 times that." "How much volume?" one of the unannounced men in the corner asked, before adding, "Name's Luan, logistics." 200 cubic, Saul said. "Then 4 times that for diamond," Luan answered. 5, Taika said, with a certain level of nonchalance. 5? No way this code monkey's thinking it's 5, Carl ungracefully interjected. 5, Taika affirmed. 5 if it's Quell diamond, denser than the common variety. "He's right," Saul said. "Quell is manufactured in solid cubes, not mined and left loose. Less airspace that way." "Solid cubes? Wily golems, those fells," Luan scoffed. 3, 4, 5 times makes no difference. Ain't no way that's moving as a solid piece. "So we need a method of transporting the cube as a solid chunk then?" asked Saul. "You're not listening," Luan said. "That bet is too big." Taika looked up from his terminal, suddenly following Saul's line of thinking. "A shuttle then?" Aidan said, suddenly getting it too. Saul nodded. "Earth be damned still. You get that piece of Quell out of the ship's hold, then what? Drag it off into the sunset?" For a logistics man, Saul was concerned by how little the man knew about logistics. "We push it out into space and pick it up later." "And how do you plan to do that, brother?" Carl asked. Charles nodded to one of the last men left unintroduced. The man stood, peeled back his coat and pulled out a slender device. "With this," the man said, tossing the device onto the table. "Hail Mary, Sophon," Charles said, apparently the only one in the room who knew what the device was. He tried to get to his feet, but instead tumbled off the chair to the floor. "Mind explaining what this is?" Saul asked, nudging the device with a rolled-up stack of manifests. "It's an OMS," Sophon said, a certain pride ringing in his voice. "An OMS?" Saul asked. "An outgrav or outward gravity material supplanter," Sophon explained with a grin. "Earth to hell, it's a bomb," Aidan said. The men sitting around the table jumped. Aidan leapt behind another table. Taika, Luan and the other man in the corner took cover as well, while Charles just shut his eyes from his place on the floor. They were shouting now. A cacophony of threats echoed in the tiny space, and a knot of anxiety formed in Saul's gut. He had been the only one who hadn't taken cover except for Sophon, and he knew that should it have been a bomb, he was too close to have stood any sort of chance of walking out of the room with his life, let alone his legs still attached. Saul waved his arms in an attempt to stop the bickering. "Easy, boss, this one's just a dud," Sophon explained after a long tense moment. "Real ones still had some tinkering." "Well, good warning you gave then, asshole," Charles said as he stood and brushed off his trousers. "Earth and hell, this place is filthy. Couldn't have picked a cleaner place, Calmos." "Yeah, a right good shit you've made here," said Carl, stepping back into the room from his hiding spot just outside the doorframe. "You expect us to work with this clown?" Aidan muttered. "This clown," said Sophon, "can blow you all back to the solar war if I'd like." Now, Saul interrupted. He hated playing the part of the father, but it was obvious to him that someone had to maintain control. "Now, Charles," Saul continued, "can you rustle up a few more for muscle?" "I believe that's why I'm here." The last man in the corner stood. He was bald, with tanned skin and a half smile of broken teeth. A sight you didn't often see nowadays, except in the poorest reaches of the sovereignty. "They call me Olivio," he said with a smile, moving around the room and shaking the hands of everyone involved. Several hours and a few more hasty introductions later, the motley team stood in a dock corridor, several bays spinward from the Parabad. "Whose shuttle are we stealing anyway?" Charles questioned as he hurried like a pup beside Saul. "Great question," said Saul, before opening a bulletin. "Taika?" "Hear you. Busy," Taika crackled back on a spotty connection. "Busy? Aren't we all a little busy at the moment?" Aidan squawked. Taika, come in." "Busy better mean what I think it means," said Saul. The bulletin fell silent. "Taika," Saul pressed, tapping his terminal. "Taika's gone sweet on us," Luan spat. Easy now. Let this surgeon work. I've got a lot of data to sift through, and it would be going a lot smoother if you'd all just have a little faith," Taika affirmed. "Besides, the only sweetie here is Luan." Taika continued with a mocking, "I'm Luan, I'm in logistics," before trailing off into a mumbled pantomime. Quiet rage washed over Luan's face. "You earthing little Luan began to say. "There," Taika said, popping up a schematic on the team's terminals. The schematic was of an older Federation-made Joma 2K6 class transport. "Curious," Saul said, noting a certain detail. "Indeed," Aidan agreed, nodding. "What is?" Luan questioned. "Seems this Joma's had some custom features added." "Yeah, like what?" Luan asked. "Extra booster, a set of suspension pods, biolab, and what I find most interesting, seems they've swapped the escape craft for a set of launch thrusters and rift-based gravity dampers." Luan paused for several seconds. "And why's that curious?" "Because, brothers," Carl said, having joined the open channel some indeterminate time ago, "Jomas are usually only space freight movers. They normally burn up in Atmo. This one's had some special love. This puppy's gonna sing." "Earthing hell, Luan," Taika cut in. "What business do you have calling yourself Logistical Luan?" "Wait. Hang on." Taika paused. "And how is it that you knew which vehicle he'd pick anyways, Carl?" "Good point," Saul wanted to say. Instead, he just raised an eyebrow. "Saw it on the dock schedule. Got my ears to the floor, you know," Carl responded. "And when was it you were going to mention it to us?" Aidan said. "Just was hoping you lot had come to the same conclusion I did." "Well, that's just great, already keeping secrets amongst yourselves," Taika quipped. "Tell me, Master Codebreaker, what did you say your last name was?" Luan prodded, a wick of triumph in his lips. "Pan," Taika said bluntly. Luan choked. "You little—" "Earth to hell," Taika toyed. "That's your name, isn't it?" "Pan. Logistical Luan Pan. Nope, just doesn't have any ring to it." Luan abruptly left the call. "Now you've gone and pissed him off," Aidan said. "And such a feat it was," said Taika. "Can we cut it with the schoolyard bullshit and get back to it?" Charles said. "He's right," Taika agreed. "And besides, you've got a pair of Station Sec coming up the corridor spinward of you." "Then you better hurry and open this hatch," Saul said. "Just a second. And there." Joma's just through the hatch and down the hall to the left, Tyker said as the hatch unlocked with a hiss. Don't say I never did anything for you. Yeah, now keep it quiet, Saul said. That goes for you too, Carl. Nothing from me over here, brother. Out, Carl said, signing off. Now Charles, Luan and Aiden. You know the plan. Stick to it and we'll all have our payday. Saul didn't wait for a reply, instead of stepping into the hatch and continuing down the hall, determined. Let's just hope Olivio and his guys hold up their end, Aiden said, hurrying behind, and soften. Gods, didn't that guy just run you the wrong way? I don't know. He seemed all right to me, said Saul, though maybe I'm just not as jaded as you. You've a point there, Cap. Let's just hope this bomb of his works. Would you two shut the hell up? Said Charles, pushing past them. Radio silence, heard of it? Gods, you two are like a pair of mating gulls. Luan followed, passing what seemed like agreement with a sullen shrug. The group entered the shuttle through a helpfully open loading ramp. Anybody home? Aiden called out. Earth and hell, just wake the whole station, Charles screeched. Hey, no one's on board, look, Aiden said, offering up his terminal. A few blips showed in the center, which was obviously them. Aiden scrolled outward to see the next closest life signs, which was nearly as far as the terminal scanners would allow. See? Aiden said. Yeah, Charles conceded. Just don't go shouting over bulletin or station sec will be coming down hard. And where did you get access to the station scan feed from? Aiden didn't answer. Ignoring the question, he found a seat. Finding the cockpit, Saul buckled himself in. These older model shuttles, though robust, this one in particular, didn't necessarily possess any sort of artificial gravity generators. Instead, the safety of the entire crew rested in good, time-tested nylon straps holding them in place. The rest of the crew followed behind, strapping themselves into free seats in the cramped cockpit, or just outside in the equally space-deprived main hold. Tyker, signal station and let them know we're ready to launch, Saul said. Aye. These station jerks won't see the wool over their eyes. Tyker responded. Station control, this is Shuttle Joma 2K6, the Herald, requesting permission to break station contact, over, Tyker said, changing his voice to remove all traces of his Sun accent and leaving his bulletin open for everyone to hear. Joma Herald, can you repeat that? We have you here for a departure not 3 days from now. Can you confirm? Said a bemused voice from station control. Yes, oh yes indeed, Control. We've an urgent matter to attend to, if you'll just release the docking clamps, Tyker insisted. Joma Herald, I know you know the proper procedure. All transit requests must first be sent through for sovereignty approval. No exceptions. You've already clearance for lift 3 days from now. What's the hurry? He's getting suspicious. Aiden leant over and whispered to Saul from the co-pilot seat. Saul typed a quick message on his terminal and hit Tyker's icon to send. Everything all right? Without breaking his conversation with station control, he responded, As Earth was green. He's got this, Saul assured the group. A silent Luan shrugged from the hold. Control, I realize that this early departure might incur some fees on our part. Why don't you check with your superior? I can wait, Tyker said. Joma Herald, is that a bribe? Control said, still neglecting to show any emotional involvement. I wouldn't dare suggest such a scenario, Tyker said, thinly feigned disbelief in his voice. Joma Herald, please hold. There was silence on the call for close to 5 minutes before Control returned. Undocking. Bearing for departure is 32 degrees angled spinward. You have yourselves a fine day, Control said before ending the call. What was that? Aiden said, confounded. Seems the pleasant gent in Control spoke with his superior, Tyker answered. And they're letting us lift. Just like that, Saul said. Well, with the proper authorization codes and... He paused, switching his voice electronically to that of an older woman with a Scottish accent. The right voice modulation to go along with it. Anything is possible. Earth be damned, Saul said, impressed. Well, let's get our feet in the water then. Sergeant Aiden, would you loose the docking harness now? It's Sergeant now, is it? Aiden snorted, reaching for the controls. Well, Diggory's already got a first mate. And besides, when all this is over, you're going to need a rank, Saul explained. The Joma pushed off, its maneuvering thrusters firing in silent cacophony, seen through the dash wall screens. The shuttle pitched, arcing its bow away from the docking tube, and quickly moved to a wider orbit of the station, just inside the shipping lanes full of slow-moving inbound and outbound freighters. Aiden made a small adjustment to the trajectory to nudge them in the direction of the dockyards. "How is the Diggory's steely first mate anyways? How is Titus?" "As steadfast and stubborn as ever. Gods only know how he's going to take all this." "Perhaps it's all better left unsaid," Saul said, only now realizing that he'd neglected to consider Titus's, let alone the rest of his crew's opinions before the event he found himself in. "This is all touching, but are we there yet?" Charles barked. "It should be coming up, just past this next arm of the station, just over the next rise," Saul said. "There it is. Coming up on the Parabad's starboard now," Aiden said, assuming co-pilot duties. "We'll bring us bow side then, and try not to be seen." "Hey, Calmos," Charles said, his voice from behind almost too close for comfort. "Know when we'll be arriving?" "Afraid I've gone and forgotten to take a wee break before now." "You're joking," Luan scoffed with incredulity. "Could be," Charles said. "Want to check?" Aiden reached into the compartment to his right and pulled out an empty water flask. "This better do it," he said, flinging the flask over one shoulder. It drifted towards Charles in the null gravity. Charles batted it away. "Hey, watch where you're putting things, Navy boy." "That's rich. Not been reactivated for a standard week, and I'm already a Navy boy." Aiden smiled sardonically. "Joma docking in 3, 2, Aiden started. The Joma slid up alongside the Pa Abad's aft hull, gliding to a halt with an audible thunk. Saul extended the shuttle's docking tube, which made contact with a solid point on the ship's hull. "From what I can tell, boys, you should have made landfall somewhere between the cargo hold and the ship's crew mess." "Pray no one heard that," Tyker said over a spotty connection. 1. The shuttle's docking tube began pressurizing, finishing when the monitor outside the door read, "Ambient, green." "That's it," Aiden said, pulling open the outer door. The crew now faced the standard jet black of the Pa Abad's outer hull. Each ship, military or otherwise, was painted black to blend in with the background of space, making them more difficult to track. "Olivio?" Saul said over the bulletin. "Olivio, you and yours in position." "Just about there, Calmos," Olivio said through a spotty connection. "My boys and I are just getting into position. Should be ready to start this brawl soon enough." Saul's plan was about to begin. He had asked for more muscle to stage a riot in the main transport hub, just outside the berth where the Pa Abad had docked. Saul knew that the crew of the Pa Abad would rush to watch, even waking their off-shift comrades to join, especially since they had been on this haul for months and craved any distraction. "There," Olivio said. "Men are just approaching each other now. Give it 2 minutes and you'll have your distraction." The two groups of men approached each other at the center of the hub, each wearing jumpsuits and sporting tattoos from rival long-haul crews. Saul watched on the shuttle's wall screen, which was showing a live feed of the hub. Just as the men were starting to get heated, a loud rumble echoed through the station. The men and everyone else in the hub looked around in confusion as a secondary explosion ripped through them, knocking many of them off their feet and blinding the camera feed. "What the hell was that?" Aiden said. "Tyker, what did you do?" Luan questioned. "Wasn't me, though hats off. That's sure one hell of a distraction," Tyker admitted. In his heart, Saul knew who it was. "Soften," he wailed over bulletin. Soften's icon appeared on the shared channel. "You rang," he said, and Saul could feel the pride emanating through the line. "Explain yourself," Saul continued to fume. "Needed a distraction, didn't you? Brawl idea was never going to cut it. This way? No chances, just success," Soften gloated. "You self-righteous bastard," Saul bellowed. "There were people in that hub. Innocents." "Ain't no one innocent when it comes to the Sovos, even you," Soften said. Saul's heart was about to burst from his chest in rage when he had a sudden realization. He motioned to Aiden, who let the bag containing Sofen's other bomb drift slowly to the floor. "I expect by your silence you were thinking of ditching the OMS I supplied you with," Sofen continued. "Not to worry, this one's the same one I brought to our little meeting. You'd have better luck cracking your suits with Charles's wife's Shitake Malatang than with that." "Then why give us it at all?" Aiden said, confusion showing on his face. "Just to see what happens, I suppose," Sofen said. "See if you've metal enough for what comes next." Next, Saul asked, but Sofen didn't respond. You'll think of something, he said instead, before leaving the channel. Damn it, Saul said. Well, we didn't get all dressed up for nothing, Charles said, handing Luan an arc-light cutter that was already powered on. Saul nodded and took up another cutter. It would take them the better part of 30 minutes to cut through the Par Abad's outer hull and another 10 or so of carefully peeling back and rerouting the inner workings of the electrical systems to not set off any alarms. Olivio? Saul said while continuing to cut. Here, boss, Olivio said, his voice sullen and slow. Hail Mary, Saul said. How many of you were caught in the blast? Most of mine are down. The blast took 'em out. I've 3 plus myself left, not that that does much good. Can you continue? I need you to get your men to the Parabad's bay doors and start running interference. That's the thing. Security's on site. They're scouting through the wreckage. What's funny is that bastard's distraction worked. It's got the Parabad's crew out in full force, tending to the survivors, even for some of my men. There's irony in that, I think. Be that as it may, I need a lookout. I'm on it, Olivio said, mustering himself to rejoin the matter at hand. I've sent 2 of mine to hunt down that bastard. The rest of us will man the wall. You've my word on that. Olivio's icon dropped out of the channel. And then there were 5, Tyker said. No member of the team responded and instead continued cutting in sullen silence. After they cut their way through, they slipped into the man-sized opening and right into the crew quarters. Olivio was right. Sofen's distraction had worked in clearing out the crew. Saul shuddered at the thought of how many had just lost their lives because of him. He tried not to dwell on it, forcing himself back into the moment. The 4 moved into a set of rigid, uninspired corridors in an equally unremarkable ship. The Parabad had been built from what Saul had guessed to be 3 mismatched common freighter designs of Federation origin. Hats off to them, Saul thought. For a fledgling bunch of nomads on the edge of civilized space, those Freddies sure had their hands firmly in the sovereignty's purse. After 20 minutes, they came to a set of conspicuously reinforced blast doors. Aiden whistled. Ever see cargo doors like this on a freighter hauling everyday goods? Better be something big behind these. My children have been wanting a new pony, though they didn't feed the last one, Charles said, and Saul couldn't tell if he was serious. Made decent hydrogel, though. Aiden made a get-a-load-of-this crazy gesture. It has to be the diamond. No other place on this vessel they'd be able to stash them, Luan chimed in. Glory me, it speaks. Charles spat. What, Tyker finally let your balls loose? To hell with that guy, Luan said. Cheer up, boys. Payday's just behind this door, Saul said, trying to distract them. Tyker, can you hear me? We've reached the second access. Mind lighting our way? Sure, Tyker said. And make it snappy. This hallway is giving me the shakes, Aiden said. The doors made an ancient thwack, then lurched open as if they were being pulled along by a team of sloths. Now, Saul said, checking his scanner. Can't be hard, but let us find the quell as quickly as possible. The 4 of them spread out, walking through gaps in the stacks of magnetized shipping crates. I'm not seeing it, Charles bellowed from somewhere on top of one of the stacks. Me either, Luan said. Seems we may have been duped. Keep looking, Saul assured them. It has to be here. The manifest makes no sense otherwise. Guys, Aiden said from somewhere near the center of the stacks, notably confused. Is it at all possible that diamonds were just a clever mislabeling on the Sovo's part? I suppose. What are you getting at? Saul said, walking to him. It's just that I've got a few crates here, matching shipping tags, identical weight once you add it all up, marked for sovereignty officials' eyes only. And what's the problem? Charles asked, leaping from the top of one of the stacks and drifting down in the low gravity. Quell wouldn't be in multiple crates. As I said, it would be formed in solid cubes, Saul said. So what? Easier to move now, no, Luan said. Don't need that psycho's bomb after all. You're not getting it, Aiden said. He grabbed a pry bar from his suit's belt and peeled back the side of one of the crates. Underneath, a glass-like veneer shone through, accompanied by a turquoise glow. Earth be damned, Saul said. Gentlemen, Tyker's voice interrupted. Been monitoring radio traffic. Seems you've a group of Station Sec coming for you. Just then, Olivio's icon popped back into existence. "Calmos, come in," he said. "We've trouble." "Report?" Saul pressed. "Seems a few Sovos have slipped past us. The count is 3, out of uniform, which is why we didn't catch them. They're headed your way." "Got it," Saul said. "How much time do we have?" "Not enough," a voice said from behind them near the cargo bay doors. Saul turned to find 3 individuals, a woman led by 2 men aiming the barrels of their hand cannons at them. Not 10 seconds later, Olivio, 2 of his men, and a battered Sophon being dragged by his torn collar entered, their barrels leveled at the ones before them. One of the men took a swing at an oblivious Luon with the barrel of his gun, catching him above the brow. Luon dropped to the ground. "Guys," Tyka said, "I don't mean to interrupt, but—" "Yes, Tyka, what is it?" Saul said, trying not to make any sudden movements. "I don't know how, but I think they found me. Tyka began to say before his line switched to static. "Well," Saul said, instructing Aidan to drop his pry bar, "looks like you've got us." This has been Chapter 6, Sea Legs of Bordeaux's Folly. Book 1 in the Obsidian Gods series. Original content written by Eric Berndt. All rights reserved. Thank you to my patrons on Patreon. If you would like to read ahead and not wait for the next video, you can find all of my chapters free of charge on my Patreon. Books 1 and 2 are complete. I am still working on 3 and 4. Though I have used AI in the creation of this video through voice and imagery, my hope once this is all wrapped up that I can hire a voice actor properly and commission an ebook. Thank you for listening.